Growing up, decisions was always already made for me. Where I went to school, what subjects I can do, how to get good grades, and even to a certain extent, what university I attended. Choosing my first job was the real first decisions that I get total autonomy in making. And I really did take a very long time to think about how to make that decision and making that decision. For those of you that have been following me for a while, you know that I went from a more traditional Asian law student path to making a U-turn, going into strategy consulting, and now making videos on YouTube about my life struggles, what I learned on my way, and trying to help others on a similar path. Choosing your first career is a very difficult decision that you have to make very early on in your career, and one that could really change the trajectory of your life. Choosing the right career gives you good quality of life, fulfillment, autonomy, etc. Choosing the wrong one, you will feel purposeless, miserable, and having to risk going back to choosing another career again. So today I'll show you my whole thought process, how I thought about it, how I make my decisions, and all the key principles that I use. So if you're ready, let's begin. So first of all, I think it's important to talk about how I got here. I grew up in a very comfortable, safe environment with predictable outcomes to most people's lives. As long as I listened to what the teacher said, as long as I listened to what my parents said, usually I get rewarded, and that's the mentality and the things I learned while growing up. It's not until I turned 18 when I left Hong Kong for UK to go to university when I started to question this reality. I started to read books, listen to podcasts, watch a lot of different videos to learn about what's out there in this world, what's possible, and what I've been sort of missing out and what I did not learn in school. I realized that adults don't actually know as much as you think they do. And if I want to have a fulfilling and satisfied life, I had to decide it myself. I had to take matters into my own hand instead of just following the default path and doing what everybody else is doing. So here are the top tips and secrets to finding your dream career in your 20s. First of all, let's talk fundamentals. These are the fundamental principles, the ideas that you have to follow and you have to understand before you can really go ahead and choose your dream career. First of all is first principle thinking. First principle thinking requires you to use facts and observations to reason from the bottom up. Usually we reason by analogy. Reasoning by analogy simply means that you look at past examples, you look at similar cases, how other people have done stuff, and you just simply take their approach, maybe with some slight twists. But instead, thinking by first principle really requires you to boil down to the most fundamental facts and then reason step by step logically into a conclusion. Think of it as cooking as a chef compared to cooking as a cook. A cook simply looks at a recipe and then follows it step by step. They might change one or two small ingredients here and there, but in general, they still follow the recipe. And now think of a chef in a 5-star Michelin French restaurant, let's say. Every week he comes up with new recipe. And these new recipe he doesn't come up with through analogy, right? He knows what each ingredient does and how different ingredient works well together, how there's different temperature of water or different cooking equipment he uses changes the texture of his food, etc. A chef thinks by first principle thinking. A cook thinks by analogy. If you want to do anything for yourself that is away from the masses, that is unique for you, that just sets you apart from the other people, you have to think by first principle. That's the first fundamental idea. Second of all, you have to be very introspective. Really understand your motives to understand what's important to you and what's not. And this really requires you to sit down, just get a piece of pen and paper or maybe open a notebook and just write them down. Write down your different desires, write down what you think you want, whether those ideas are actually yours or were they planted to you by society, etc. I remember doing that when I was 18. At that time, I was doing a legal internship in a law firm, and I just really didn't enjoy my time there. So during my free time, I always put out that article, do the exercise that was talked about in that article, and that's really how I started to make the U-turn into a different career path. So I definitely recommend you doing that as well. Understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your different unquestioned assumption, your different desire, your motives, and that really helps you to start from ground again. So you won't be building up on different assumptions or different desires that was actually planted by you. You can start from a blank state, which is scary of course, but then it's a lot more helpful as well. Thirdly, you definitely have to prioritize your long-term thinking compared to your short-term thinking. By this, I mean you have to sacrifice maybe the next 1 to 3 years for something that you want in the next, say, 5 to 10 years. This is very important, especially in choosing your first career path. So that would mean that you have to sacrifice short-term compensation, short-term pay that you'll get for a career that is better for you, your personal growth in the long term. Becoming a lawyer would make me a lot more money, initially, but then I think going into strategy consulting gives me a lot more growth opportunities, give me a lot more options down the line, which is why I made the U-turn. The last fundamental principles that you have to understand, and I think is very, very important as well, is that passion is important, but focusing and prioritizing your strength and what you're good at is usually the better way to go. Now, there's a few problems with the general idea of following your passion. First of all, some passion might just not be a good career path. For example, I really like football, but then in Hong Kong, to become a professional footballer, you basically make peanuts. No disrespect. I actually have friends that are professional footballers in Hong Kong because I used to play for some of the top teams' youth academy in Hong Kong, but then it's just not a path for me. Second of all, you might want to leave your passion as a passion rather than change it into a career path. There's many scientific research that shows that once you started getting external rewards for something, even though you might have like that thing to begin with, your motive and your brain circuit sort of like changes how you see the thing. Going back to the football example, say that I play football for fun, which I do. If I become a professional footballer, then the whole perspective of me seeing football changes. Finally, which I think is quite a revolutionary idea that not a lot of people think about, is that passion can actually come after you're good at something. If you think back to all your passions or the things that you find interesting, a lot of the times you weren't interesting the first time you tried it. You became interested, you became passionate about it after you realize you're pretty good at it. Going back to football, my dad is a huge football fan. He said that when I was very young, like 3 to 7 years old, he would bring me out to like the park and stuff and play football with me. And he said that I would never enjoy it. I'd rather play stuff like badminton. But then eventually I found my own way with football when I was 12, 13. When I started playing it and realizing that I was a lot better than people who had the same training as me. That's how I eventually got into football. I became more and more passionate about it. So again, going back to the point, passion can actually come after you became good at something. And that applies to not just like your interest, hobby, it applies to your job as well. So after talking about why passion is not such a good indicator of what career you should go down, let's look at strength and why you should prioritize strength. Now, first of all, like I said, right, if you're good at something, you eventually develop a passion or an interest. So that's the first reason. Second of all, in the modern capitalist society we live in, you are rewarded by how much value you can bring to the society. You can bring the most value in aspects where you are the best at doing that thing. And that's why you should think about going into your career. The more value you create, the more handsomely rewarded you get. And this isn't just monetary compensation that we're talking about. This also brings you other benefits, which leads to the second point of why you should be following your strength. Now, following your strength and what you're good at brings you not just monetary reward, but through your career progression, it brings you even more important things like autonomy, impact, and control, which are all very, very important to living a very satisfied, fulfilled life. Now, think of those three things on top of your monetary compensation. Now, if you're going into something that you're good at with those four things, doesn't that maybe even give you more room to pursue your passion? So to summarize this point in one sentence, focus on value creation. Go where you create the most value. Passion will come after. If you're interested in like the arguments for and against passion and strength, you can go read the book So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. I read it the year before. It was a pretty good read, so definitely go check it out. So now let's go into part 2, which is execution, how you can start crafting your path and choosing your dream career. First of all is introspection, which is what I talked about understanding yourself. There are 2 general things you have to understand before you can start choosing your career path. A, what you desire, and B, what are your strengths and weaknesses. First of all, when talking about what you desire, it is important to understand that we desire a lot of different things, and very often they come into conflict with one another. You might have some personal desires in terms of what your purpose in life is, what your values are. You might also have other lifestyle desires. For example, you want to fly around, you want to travel around. You might also have different practical desires. For example, you want to have stable income, personal, lifestyle, moral, social, and practical. After going through all your desires in these fields, you realize that they very often come against one another. For example, you're an artist. You might think that your personal purpose is to create art that impacts the world, create art that express your feelings. But you might also have practical desires to make enough money to have a stable income. You'll realize that you have similar problems as well. And once you've written them all out, you can start to rank them. Are my personal desires the most important, or are my practical desires, for example, more important? Once you do this thinking for long enough, and once you really dive deep into the exercise, you realize that some of your desires are more important than others, and this really helps you gain clarity in terms of how to really choose your dream career. For example, I have the practical desire to have a job that has a good income. I also have personal values to do jobs that are impactful, meaningful, and that I can learn a lot from. But doing this exercise also led me to learning that I don't have such a strong social desire. I don't desire that much to have a very high status job, to have a very prestigious job, which lawyer would be like the perfect career. And after realizing that, it was a lot easier for me to give up my path to becoming a lawyer, which before I just kept holding on to. Now, after doing all those rankings, you can also do an extra bonus step, which I thought was like super helpful for me, which is to examine which of those desires are imposters. Now, when we talk about imposters, that means desires that wasn't actually created by you organically, but was different desires or different opinions that you picked up while growing up along the way, maybe unintentionally through media, society, or your parents. Now, a very classic example is you think that you have to become a lawyer, which might be a value planted in you by society. And once you do enough thinking and enough thinking, you realize that, oh, I didn't actually come up with this. I don't want to become a lawyer. Society told me to become a lawyer. And that way it's a lot easier to remove different old assumptions and different ideas you thought you held, and to really give room to create new and more organic opinions and more organic desires that you have. So that's introspection for you. This is very, very important. Definitely do not think that you can just wing it. For me, I spent at least a week thinking about these problems every night. Spend 10, 15, 20 minutes every night. Think about it every day. Do your introspection, because that will really help you gain clarity over what your dream first career will be. And then you can start to look at your strengths and your weaknesses. This step is a lot easier than the first step, and I'll just give you a few prompts to think about. What can you do effortlessly that other people can't do? What skills can you pick up that are very easy to you but seem to take longer for other people? What do other people tell you you're good at? What are your biggest life achievements so far, and what skills were related to them? Now, just through thinking by these different prompts should help you have a very clear idea on what your strengths are. Don't tell me that you don't have a strength, because everybody does. It's just a matter of how much you've developed it or how hidden it is. This doesn't have to be like hard skill. For example, I'm very good at calculation. I'm very good at coding. This can also be soft skills. For example, I'm very good at public speaking. I'm very good at like communication, talking to people, etc. Those can also be a strength. Now, that is introspection summarized. Now let's look to step 2, which is to start looking outwards. Now let's really start doing research and planning ahead on how to get to your dream career. First of all is career research. You might not realize what kind of jobs there are outside, and that was my case. I didn't even know management consulting was a thing until I started researching about jobs other than becoming a lawyer. After you've identified a few potential careers that might be pretty fun, one thing I really recommend you to do is to reach out to people doing those jobs and to have coffee chats with them, to just have a quick phone call with them. That's the best way for you to really understand whether that's really something you're looking for, and really understand the field, understand the industry. Now, I know that 99% of you watching this probably won't do it because it's hard, it's uncomfortable. So those of you, the 1% that will really go ahead and do it, that's another benefit to you. You know that most people won't be doing it, so if you do it, you immediately stand out. On top of that, it's also a great general self-improvement practice. Embrace the discomfort, learn to go through uncomfortable moments, learn to go out of your comfort zone. I'll tell you, for me, it was very hard to do so as well. I'm just like young student, I've got nothing to give them in return. How on earth will someone want to have a phone call with me or go out to coffee with me? What you don't realize is that a lot of these people actually did similar things when they were younger, so they actually want to pay it back forward to the new generations. This way of learning about the industry and the job is a lot more detailed, a lot more personal, and a lot more helpful than just doing a quick Google search or even typing your query on ChatGPT. And finally, a bonus tip, which I think you can do as well, is to take mini experiments. By this I mean doing some short work experience in related fields, or joining uni clubs. For example, before I was 100% sure that I wanted to go into management consulting, I actually joined a few consulting societies in my university, which really allowed me to do a lot of volunteering consulting projects. And that is when I really realized that I think the work is interesting. I love working in teams, I love working with new people, solving interesting problems and seeing the impact that I can deliver. So definitely find whatever ways to go to workshops or apply for different small work experience wherever you can find them. Everything that I talked about so far in this video, most people will simply just watch it and forget about it because it is hard to do. It is hard to sit there to reflect on yourself. It is very hard to just sit there and journal about your personal desires. It is very hard to reach out to people to organize for coffee chat. That's the price you have to pay if you do not want to go down the default path. That's the price you have to pay if you want to live an intentional life, if you want to do something different. Start one step at a time, whip out a pen and paper, start writing, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.